My wife disappeared after a trip with the girls and returned many years later with a child. I made her regret it. When Masha went on that trip with her friends, I didn't think much of it. We had been married for 5 years and we had a wonderful life. She always said she needed some time for herself to escape the daily routine. I supported her because I understood how important it was to break free from the usual environment sometimes. But when Masha didn't return after a week, I started to worry. At first, I thought she was just delayed due to unforeseen circumstances. I called her, but her phone was off. I tried reaching out to her friends, but no one could help me. Time went by, and my anxiety grew. I started looking for her on social media, but there were no updates there either. Months passed, and I began to accept reality. Masha was gone. I didn't know what to think. At first, I hoped she had simply decided to start a new life, but with each passing day, that seemed less and less likely. I began seeking help from private detectives and contacted the police. But all my efforts yielded no results. My friends and family tried to support me, but no one could replace Masha. After a year of her disappearance, I decided it was time to move on. I focused on work, started exercising, and even began dating other girls. But deep down, I still hoped she would return. Then one day, after 3 years, I received a message from an unknown number. I opened it and couldn't believe my eyes. It was Masha. She wrote that she had returned and wanted to meet. I was in shock, but at the same time, I felt a strange excitement. I didn't know what she would say and how I would react. We met at the cafe where we used to spend a lot of time together. I was anxious, but when she walked in, my heart stopped. Masha looked different, her face was a bit changed, and she was holding a small boy. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. "Hi," she said, and I noticed her voice sounded different. "Hi," I replied, trying to hide my anxiety. You're back." She nodded and sat down across from me. I looked at the child and asked, "Who is this?" "This is my son," she replied, and I sensed pride in her voice. At that moment, I felt something inside me break. I didn't know what to say. Masha continued to talk about her adventures, how she spent those years, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about how she could leave me and return with another person. "Why didn't you write?" I asked, interrupting her story. I didn't know how to do it," she replied, looking down. I was ashamed. Ashamed? For what? For disappearing and leaving me alone. My voice sounded angry, and I couldn't contain my emotions. "I was in a difficult situation," she started, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't understand how she could so easily leave everything we had. After our meeting, I couldn't sleep. I thought about how she returned with a child and what I felt. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I still loved Masha, but on the other, I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. The next day, I decided I needed to meet her again. I wanted to understand her motives, to know why she left and came back. We met at the same cafe, and I began to ask her questions. "Why did you leave?" I asked. "I couldn't stay in a relationship that didn't make me happy," she replied. "I thought I needed to leave to figure out what I wanted." "And did you find that happiness?" I asked, feeling anger boiling inside me. "I found myself," she said, and I saw sincerity in her eyes. I realized I needed time to sort out my feelings. We talked for a long time, and I started to understand that she had indeed changed. She talked about her struggles, about how hard it was for her when she left me. I saw her trying to be open and honest, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Weeks passed, and I still couldn't decide what to do. I continued to meet with Masha, but every time I saw her with Artem, I was overwhelmed with jealousy and pain. I couldn't understand how she could forget about us and start a new life with another person. One day, I decided I needed to take a step back. I couldn't keep meeting her, knowing she had already built a new family. I called her and told her I needed time to sort out my feelings. She agreed, but I saw her face darken with sadness. In the following months, I tried to rebuild my life. I focused on work, started exercising, and even signed up for self-improvement courses. But thoughts of Masa wouldn't leave me. I often remembered our happy moments, and it brought me pain. One day, 6 months after our breakup, I received a message from Masha. She wrote that she wanted to meet and talk. I didn't know what to think, but eventually, I agreed. We met in the park where we used to walk together. I missed you, she said when I approached. I missed you too, I replied, although I wasn't entirely sure it was true. We began to talk, and she told me how hard it was for her to raise Artem alone. I saw her trying to be strong, but there was fatigue in her voice. I understand that I made many mistakes, she admitted, but I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Inside me, emotions were still boiling, and I couldn't forgive her. But at the same time, I understood that she had suffered too. I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive you, I finally said. I understand, she replied, and I saw tears in her eyes. But I hope we can be friends. I thought about it. Friends. That seemed impossible. But I didn't want to lose her completely. We started to communicate, and with each passing day, I began to feel that she had indeed changed. She had become a caring mother, and I saw her trying for Artem. Over time, I began to accept her past. I realized that everyone has the right to make mistakes. And what matters is not how we fall, but how we rise. We began to communicate more frequently, and I started to feel that there was still a connection between us. But one day, when I came to visit her, I saw her talking to another man. It was unexpected, and I felt jealousy boil inside me again. I didn't know how to react. Who is this? I asked when they finished their conversation. This is my friend, she replied, but I noticed tension in her voice. A friend, or something more. I couldn't help but ask. It's just a friend, she said, but I didn't believe her. Inside me, the feeling of betrayal resurfaced. I couldn't understand how she could so easily move on to another person. After everything we had been through, I felt anger wash over me. You know, I think you never valued what we had, I said, and bitterness tinged my voice. You're wrong, she replied, and I could hear hurt in her tone. I tried my best. We began to argue, and soon the conversation escalated into shouting. I couldn't hold back, and everything I had been bottling up inside came rushing out. I spoke about how she had left me, how she had betrayed our feelings, and how painful it had been for me without her. But in response, I only heard words about how hard it had been for her, how she had fought for her happiness and her son's happiness. At that moment, I realized that I couldn't continue like this. I left her in tears. Days passed, and I decided I needed to sever ties with Masha completely. I couldn't bear this pain and constant reminders of what had been. I sent her a message saying that it would be better for us to part ways. She replied that she understood and that it might be the best decision for both of us. But I sensed bitterness in her words. I didn't want her to suffer, but I also couldn't endure it any longer. Time passed, and I started a new life. I met another girl with whom I began a serious relationship. She was kind, caring, and understood me. I felt that I had finally found what I was looking for. But one day, while I was out with my new girlfriend, I saw Masha with Artem. They were playing in the playground, and I felt something inside me stir again. I couldn't take my eyes off them. Masha looked happy, and I realized that I still missed her. I decided to approach and say hello. When I got closer, she looked at me in surprise. Hi, she said, and I felt warmth in her voice. Hi, I replied, and at that moment, the spark between us reignited. We started talking, and I saw how much she had changed. She had become more confident and happier. I told her about my new girlfriend, and she seemed genuinely happy for me. I'm glad you found happiness, she said, and I saw light in her eyes. We chatted for a while longer, and I realized that there was still a connection between us. Although we could not return to what we had, I felt that we could now be friends. As time went on, I began to understand that life goes on. Masha and I learned to live in peace, and perhaps that was the best thing that could happen to us. We both became stronger. And now we had the opportunity to build new relationships while not forgetting the past. I understood that sometimes life can be unpredictable, and it is important to be able to forgive. We both made mistakes, but now we had a chance to start anew. And although our paths diverged, I knew that